Barbara, Barisa Mason,
You ready?
2.2 FTE. Did she go on maternity?
We could ask Joe that question when we do the personnel. I don't know.
I know.
No.
Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Let's start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just a quick announcement. 2 board members not here had prior commitments, but we definitely have a quorum of 5. This meeting is our 3rd in a row where we're going to talk about the budget, focus completely on that so we can give it the right amount of attention it deserves. So now can I have a motion to adopt an agenda? Mrs. Hoffman, second Mrs. Burjat. All in favor? So I'll read off the study session comments. These are designed for the purpose of having administrative updates to the Board of Education. No public comments at these meetings. Residents may attend the next scheduled business meeting on April 9th and or contact the board by email with any comments or questions. All questions come to the office of the Public Information Officer and are shared with the board and our superintendent as appropriate. Policy questions, concerns are typically addressed by the board president. Operational questions, concerns typically addressed by the superintendent and or designee. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Robinson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Presley. Before I go into the budget, I just want to share a couple of things, and I need to get the details on them, but if you may have read today, there are a couple different news reports related to state budget as well as federal budget. And I mentioned in Friday bulletin to the board that the big dispute right now at the state level is the governor sees the available funds as X, the comptroller see it as X+1, and the assembly wants to see it as X+2. So the question is, who's going to win out in this process in terms of available funds for the state, which subsequently then mean available funds for education? And the Assembly just passed their budget today, and I haven't looked at the details of it yet, but they're proposing more than the governor proposed in his budget, not a lot more, but more. But more importantly, they're rejecting several key proposals that the governor had in his that we advocated for when we were downtown. One particular was the combination of aids into the service aid, going from 11 aid categories to 1, which would be detrimental to moving forward, as well as the governor is adamant that he will veto any budget without a permanent tax cap piece in it. The Assembly is rejecting that proposition because I think, like most people, recognize that the current tax cap law has a lot of flaws, and the worst thing you want to do is make something permanent that's bad. It's not about tax and trying to control taxes. It's just a bad piece of law that's on the books right now. And so hopefully between the Assembly and the Senate, people will force the governor to really take a pause and take the tax cap piece out of the budget process so that people can carefully analyze and look at it before we have, quite frankly, another bad law in the state that we have to live with. And so that's a big thing that's being watched very closely and could, in fact, delay the April 1st budget process. But, it's only May 12th now, and so we have a lot of time between May 12th and April 1st. A lot of things happen, especially in the political world. So I just wanted to point it out. The second piece that's an interesting piece to watch, and probably I think the last time that we really paid attention to federal budget was when we had a huge financial crisis, and President Obama at that time intervened with the stabilization supports of schools in the same year where we lost $9 million in state aid, and so the federal government came in a very positive way. Right now, the federal budget is getting a lot of attention for education because of the opposite, for a proposed significant reduction in federal funds for education. And so watching those details very closely, and it's one of those things that I think on a local level sometimes people don't think about, but when you think about, we have in federal funds probably about $3.8 million in federal funds, and take that out of the equation, that's a significant impact on local taxpayers and or a significant reduction in program and services to students who actually need those program services the most. And so that's the irony to what's happening now. And so it always become to me amazing that it's a shell game. It's never an issue, I don't think, of do we have enough money. It's issue, what do we prioritize our spending on. So watching both of those dynamics, because clearly what happens at the federal level impacts the state budget, and what happens at the state budget impacts our budget sequence. So we're going to see what's domino effect, and not only in education, but also on the health side, because, again, if you have issues on the health side, it also has issues on the education side because of the interrelated pieces with personnel and health benefits and things of that nature. So I share those with you as a board that as we even talked tonight about our budget, and when we get into some revenue later on, we're taking a very conservative, if you will, approach to the revenue side of the budget because of some of these unknown factors that are lingering out there. So just kind of keep that in mind, that what we talk about tonight, we hope that we don't have to have any significant changes because of the more conservative approach that we're taking as a school system. I'll just pause if there are any questions related to those items.
When you say conservative, do you mean aligning it with the current budget proposed by the governor?
Yeah, so and I'll show you exactly when we get to that point on the revenue side what we're doing. And because we, for years, we have kind of taken the tact of how do we control our destiny as a system, and not being so contingent upon what happens at the state level. And so you'll hear me use terms like controlling our cost footprint and repurposing within the cost footprint. So it's not necessarily do we need to add a significant increase in dollars to maintain what we're doing or to add what we're doing, versus looking at the funds that we have, and when opportunities present themselves, and I'll point out some of those in a second, how do we maximize those opportunities so we can continue to provide quality programs or enhance programs, and yet having a very minimal impact on the taxpayers, and not being so reliant on the political winds in terms of state aid, and because we've seen over the years that our state aid increases have been very minimal over the years. So we try to figure out how do we control those factors as we move forward.
Not sure exactly where the cuts would actually impact in terms of within the federal budget, but historically, I know that most of those things that the federal government mandates are underfunded and have been, but yet they are mandates.
Yeah.
So that if those cuts were in certain areas, there would be greater impact than others, because we then would have to take funds from places where we would choose to spend it on those things that are mandated.
Yeah, and absolutely. And here's a irony that you bring up, Mr. Delalo. Also in the news, and I sent an email to Mrs. Smiley to say give me some information on our special education. The Board of Regents is paying particular attention to performance of special education students in New York State because of a pretty negative report, if you will, from the feds about New York's performance of New York students in special education. And so the irony of that is special education, as you know, is mandated under federal law, and in fact supposed to be supported significantly under federal law, and has been grossly undersupported under federal law. Mm-hmm. And so the irony of this is the feds are now hammering states about performance at the same time that they're cutting funding to the thing that they're hammering states that should be doing better. And I just, to me, it's just kind of bizarre that to say, shame on you, you're not doing well and good enough, and what we're going to cut. Special education is one of those areas at the federal level that they're looking to reduce funding. So I'm not sure if this incentive is that, okay, since you're not doing so well, we're going to take more money away from you and really force you to do it better, because we think that's I don't know, it's the carrot or the stick or the hammer, and I don't know what's the motivation. But it's just an interesting irony that both those things are happening right now. And so I'm sure that's going to be a big push from the Board of Regents, and rightfully so. And here's a system we have been focused on that particular over the years, and the board knows, and we're going to have some comments tonight, that some of the things that we're trying to do to make sure that we ramp up our not only offerings but our supports for students with disabilities at all levels. And so you hear a couple of things tonight that we're proposing in the budget that speaks directly to that. So again, it's also another indication of, yes, federal funds are out there. That's a source to address. In fact, a lot of our special education services are in fact covered by federal dollars. And so as we look at that and thinking, okay, well, we can't say we don't or can't do more for kids because we don't have any more dollars. We simply say we have to figure out different ways to do more for kids, but mandate or not, because we know it's a necessity. If we're really focused on the system, trying to focus on equity and opportunities and outcomes, some kids need more to be on an even playing field, bottom line. And so that's our obligation as a system. So again, great backdrop for as we walk through some of the details. For the board to keep context, because I think the important piece of it is not hey, this costs $10 versus this costs $20. I mean, those, quite frankly, conversation become very irrelevant fast, versus what are the bigger picture? What are we trying to impact? What are we trying to influence with this budget? And your comfort level as a board to say, yeah, this budget is adding value to this area and influencing these things. And so subsequently, as a board, we support those initiatives. So that's the context I wanted to lay out, knowing that these other dynamics are taking place. So let me jump into that, the budget, and then after this, we'll have a presentation on I'm actually going to step up. I'm going to actually ask also Dr. Wood and Kathy Chase to come up as well, because at certain points, I'm going to have both of them kind of intervene on a couple of things with the budget process. Let me move this back so I'm not in your way. It's certainly, the board has heard it, and I think it's worth repeating, particularly for our audience who watch the board meetings on live stream or otherwise, that our focus is truly this. You know, in 2008, we had conversations at this level about the 2020 vision, what we're going to do in 2020, and we're knocking at the door of 2020 right now. And so now it's like the next level of, okay, what does the 2030, this our kindergartens in school, what does that look like for them? And so this whole future present piece then takes us, we're going to put ourselves there and look back and ask ourselves, what do we need to do now so when we get there, we're achieving those things that we want to achieve. And so that's the if you want to say the theme or the behind the whole board budget process, and certainly the board have seen this piece of it, but I think it's worthwhile. We have a great mission statement, and one of the things that we have been trying to do is how do we actualize that mission statement? How do we bring it to life so people see what it means? You know, it's talking about having an engaged experience for kids, and kids having a voice and passion for learning. And that was a theme several years ago. We talked about how do we make sure that the experience is such that kids are excited about their school experience and not just simply want to go through their school experience. That it's more than academics. It's all the stuff that makes great kids. In fact, I commented on Cameron at our community conversation on this past Saturday, saying that he's the kind of kid, exemplified kid who wants to be on the board as a sophomore and wants to be on the foundation board and doing all these things that makes him a well-rounded person. And we hope that all the various involvement that all our kids are engaged in make them well-rounded individuals for the next phase of their lives. The innovative piece of it is important. So we think about that, you know, how innovative are we being as a system? And innovative doesn't necessarily mean buying all the fancy bells and whistles stuff. I think sometimes people get caught into that, thinking that if you don't have the newest this and newest that, you're not being innovative. Well, no, you might actually be pretty wasteful in some instances. So how do we look at that piece of it in terms of making sure that what we're doing is personally relevant to all, to not only students, but to our employees and the things that we do, training with employees. How do we make sure it's relevant to people so that they remember that experience and not just memorizing that experience as a part of who they are when it comes to the learning process. The cultural competence piece is a huge piece of it, because we can't essentially say we're going to do right for kids if we don't really understand kids, if we don't appreciate kids, if we don't respect the various backgrounds that kids bring to the table. We can't effectively say we're going to do right for kids if we don't know those kind of things. So how do we really understand where kids are coming from, where families are coming from, and try to do those kind of things, and recognizing that we're preparing them for a very broad world that's way different from the experience that they have every day within their schools and their community. And all this comes from the reason why we're having this conversation, that it's about the community, how we as a broader community appreciate what a quality public education does for our young people and that next generation of leaders. And so this is our mission. This is our mission as a system. And for me, it's a mission that speaks to all the things that we need to be doing all the time. And so we kind of break it apart because then we use these parts to drive and have conversation about what are we doing programmatically and otherwise as a system. So that becomes a big part of that. So the board have seen this. I'm not going to go into details, Vernon, but this is our fiscal responsibility goal. And it's important. The word is important. It's fiscal responsibility. And that implies that you're very careful with resources that you have. And careful not necessarily mean I'm going to bury them in the sand and don't use them. Careful in terms of I'm going to use them very effectively and leverage opportunities, because if I'm spending $1, I'm trying to get $1.50 worth of return from that piece of it. So how do we leverage those resources? So that's the fiscal responsibility piece, and that's everyone's responsibility as we go through the system. And so this also drives how we, again, not what we do, look at what we're doing currently, but more importantly, what we want to do in the future, for that future-present perspective. When we're out there and we're looking back, what can we do right now to preserve that future piece of it? Again, as I'm going, if there are questions you have, please, ask. So we kind of started going, so we have all this, so if you want to take a global perspective, if you will, on the district as a mission and the goal related to finance and resources, and then started breaking it down to personalize it now. So the more academic piece of it, the intellectual conversation, to the authentic conversation. So how does this really impact people? So now it becomes real. So each time, every layer becomes closer and closer to what action is. And so we start talking about asking ourselves these questions. If what we're proposing to do with the budget, how relevant is it? Does it make our classroom experiences more relevant? And if someone hesitates to answer that question, well, we're not doing it. Because if it's not relevant, why are we doing it? Why, think about it. Why we do something that's irrelevant, right? So we have to ask ourselves those key questions all the time. The responsive piece, are we in fact being responsive to not only current needs, but emerging needs, which means that we have to always have that future look. What's coming down the pike? How responsive are we doing? Are we preparing ourselves for prosperity, if you will, as we move forward? And then the last piece, the responsibility piece, that's about all employees focus on all students being successful. And that's an important piece of it, because that's every day. That's every day, that's every interaction. All employees focus on the success of all students, knowing that we're going to have ups and downs, but the piece says we have a constant forward trajectory, constant forward view in terms of what things that we're trying to do as a system. Mr. Dow.
This responsibility thing caused me to reflect on something I just read this morning. I think we remember a time, maybe 10, 12 years ago, when we had certain benchmarks that then essentially labeled students or categorized students for certain services, and as long as they stayed within certain parameters on test scores, they received the services. But as soon as they were out of there, it was gone.
Yeah.
So we instituted a continuum of services so that we phased them in and out according to the needs of the individual students. Well, I was reading an article this morning. Larry Spring was talking about last year or this year, they had just instituted a new program called Continuum of Services. And he was afraid that he didn't want to lose that.
Yeah.
Well, we've been doing this for 10 or 12 years. So obviously, we're being responsible and way ahead of the curve.
Absolutely. And you see that we basically, I give a perfect example, and I wish Mrs. Smiley was here. Oh, she is. I didn't recognize you. So you look so splendid, Mrs. Smiley. Must be my glasses. That I can't see that far. It's supposed to be for a distance. I can't see for a distance. My eyes are bad all over the place. So I did eye check. But so I'm just sharing. I shared a correspondence with Mrs. Smiley where a young lady who 3 years ago struggling reader, to the point where this kid hated school because she hated the fact that she and her classmate said to read, she didn't want to raise her hand. So here's a kid in third grade who's about to be, quite frankly, just check out of school in third grade, psychologically thinking that I'm not a good student. And we started supporting this student. Kid's in fifth grade. Kid is thriving. So the question is, do we, cut them off or support the kid to continue to thrive to a point where, you know what, yeah, we slowly wean, but it's not abrupt, or you meet the minimum threshold, sorry, you're out of here kind of thing, versus, how do we keep supporting kids so that we know that they go beyond just having sea legs, that they have a solid foundation, and they truly do not only believe, but they know that they're effective learners. And so your piece is going to come up in some of the conversation that you see here in a second with that piece of it in terms of being, that's the responsibility piece that I totally lost Kelly here. My apology, Kelly.
I just visualize something. Training wheels, teaching a kid to ride a two-wheel bike. Take the training wheels off, but you don't take your hand off the back of the seat until you're pretty sure the kid's going on their own and not going to fall down.
Yeah. Is it still up top, Kelly, or not? Oh, there we are. We want to put in present mode. Okay. So that gives a sense of when we start assessing needs in the budget, these are some key questions that we ask, and part of the reason, so Dr. Wood, part of her role, meeting with all the instruction leaders, so meeting with middle school principals and related academic administrators, meeting with elementary principals, meeting with these folks and having these very serious conversations, not only about what's the new thing, but what are the things that we do and how effective are those things? Because if they're not effective, we have to make a decision. Do we want to continue them or not, or change them or do otherwise? And can we change everything that we think? No, but there are certain things that we know, again, this kind of leveraging concept, that if we do this better, it'll help these things. And so let's make that one the priority versus if we do this thing better, it only makes this thing better. Versus what are those things that we do that we know that impacts other things? And so let's try to prioritize those changes so we can have that ripple effect, if you will, when we go through the budget process. So again, the backdrop is important. The value added piece, the three dimensions that we look at the budget from, the value add, we look at academic capacity. That's everything talking about what's the class size, what's the composition of our classes. Who are the kids within our system? We need to know that. Who are the kids that, and so it's not just about the number of kids, but who are the kids? What are their respective strengths, weaknesses? What are the things that they bring to the table that we need to take advantage of? Academic supports is a big part of the value add, the equity efforts that we're trying to make sure. And academic rigor is not necessarily harder classes, as I said before. It's the different courses we're trying to introduce all the time to make sure that kids have a wide variety of options. So when they go to college, they're exposed to different things so they can make good choices. Or when they go into the world of work, they're exposed to different things so they can make different choices. And so you hear a little bit more about that as we go through. The cause effectiveness piece of it is a big part of it. Everything that we do, we talk about this all the time, especially from a personnel management piece you see here. And you'll see it in the budget tonight when we have retirees. We look at retirees and say, okay, this creates an opportunity for us. Or we have a vacant position. We ask ourselves the question, do we need to refill that position, or can we fill it something differently to give us a better result or a different result? So personnel management becomes a big part of it because we hire people. We hire people to do the job. 80% of our budget is related to personnel costs. And so if we don't control those costs very well, we could find ourselves being totally out of balance in terms of where we are in terms of budget and results. And so we try to manage those things very carefully all the time. And this just gives you a flavor of on the revenue side of it, the tax cap that we just spoke about. Generally, we're about 26% of our revenue from state aid. When I got here, we were a little bit higher, but each year we've kind of fluctuated. Right now, we're around at 26, 27% of our revenue from state aid. The tax cap is an interesting one. You're going to see more about it. The tax cap, we have never got to the top level of tax cap. And some people probably think that's bad business. You should try to take advantage of the tax cap. However, we always feel, too, that we always present a budget that meets our needs. And so we start with that first. What's the budget meets our needs? And then how does it compare? So we don't start with, hey, let's take advantage of this and squeeze it all, whatever in. We kind of go the opposite way. The tail is not wagging the dog, so to speak. And so we look at those kind of things as we move forward. And so more of these things we'll talk about a little bit once we get on the revenue side, but it's just a good glimpse for certainly you as a board, for the public to be able to kind of look back and see what our history has been, because in many cases our history is a reflection of what our future is going to be as well. So we try to keep track of those things, make sure that we're being relatively consistent in our progress as we move from year to year. Keep going the opposite way here. So these are some areas that we presented to the board a while back, and they have been changed. Some of them have modified since because of conversations that's come up over the course of several weeks. The external side, health insurance is one of those areas that we look at very carefully. We spend about $26 million dollars in health insurance. A lot of money in health insurance. So we have to figure out how do we try to control those costs as much as we can. Retirement costs is one of those pieces. The next gen science standards, and later on I'm going to have Dr. Wood talk a little bit about one initiative we're trying to do with elementary science and some different things that's going to be initially seen like a significant dollar impact, but we think is going to change how we look at elementary science. So she's going to talk about that later on once we get to a certain part of the budget. For the implications, there's always talk around, are they going to mandate it, or they're not going to mandate it, or they're going to fund it, and all those kind of things. And we have a futures committee, which some point in next early spring, we'll have a presentation to the board on some of those things related to the futures committee that's going to address the 4-day K piece. But we always have to have it in our mind as we go through the budget process in terms of what potential implications are there. So I'm going to walk through all these things little bit by little bit here and trying to just show you some of the areas that we're looking to add some costs to. So I'm going to take some time and pause between each one of them. So if you look on the health insurance side, kudos to Kathy Chase and her team. They spend a lot of time with health insurance brokers and all different people trying to figure out how do we control health insurance costs. We spend a lot of time in negotiations talking about how do we look at plan design. And because I mean it's a whole notion. I use my car analogy all the time. You have features in your car that you never ever use, but you paid a lot of money for them. Well, we can't afford that luxury when we're talking about. So if people aren't using certain things, why are we paying for stuff that people never use or rarely use? And so how do we use those kind of squeeze those things to contain costs? And so when you look at health insurance, $27.1 million total cost that we anticipate paying for health insurance in the coming year, and we're looking about a less than 1% increase in total cost of health insurance. That's unheard of right now, to the point where when Kathy showed me that first time, I had to kind of like, you sure you got this right? Because if it's not right, we're going to have some problems if we find it after the fact. But a lot of it is that we have done a lot to contain costs. And so if I would initially came up here and say to the board, hey, we're going to spend $209,000 more in health insurance, you're going to like, oh my God, that's a lot. But when you put it in context, you see that that less than the percent is pretty good, pretty much flatline when you really think about the cost exposure for health insurance for us moving forward. On the retirement side, we've had some ups and downs. The employer retirement system, their rates went up, and so we've seen some increased costs for employees, so it's essentially our support staff employees. Then the teacher retirement system, as the name implies, teachers and administrators, there's a reduction in the percentage, and so there's a net between the two of them, and this is an interesting one because we know that it ebbs and flows. We know that it's going down this year, and next year we'll be back coming up again. So we have to figure out how do we balance it over a multi-year perspective and not get so happy that, oh my God, yeah, you do something today that then next year you're totally trying to undo. So how do we kind of create that balance between those two costs all the time? And so we look at the pension cost piece of it. The next gen science standard, I'll have Elizabeth talk about that a little bit because because one of the areas that, as you know, the state of New York changed. We went from Common Core to Battle of Common Core, and now they dropped the label Common Core, and now we call them the next gen standards in New York, which in many cases look, feel like, smell like Common Core, but they call something else. So we're very thoughtful about how do we attack it in a way that we are not simply reacting to the popular fad, versus attacking in a way that enhances, if you want to say, the overall quality of the experience that kids are having. That it doesn't matter if it's because of Common Core or not. What we're doing is something that's going to be rich for years to come. And so you want to talk about the science piece a little bit?
It actually comes at a good time where we're ready to do a reset of our elementary science kits. We've been kit-based, meaning teachers get a box in the mail and it has all the materials to do some sort of lab experiment over a period of time. And we have been really pleased with that because our elementary students need more hands-on time. In fact, I just happened to be walking through a classroom about 2 weeks ago, and I just stopped in and saw kids so excited about watching colors separate on coffee filters as they used eyedroppers of water. And really, what a great learning experience. Well, with the new standards come a realignment of which content areas and themes are taught at which grade levels, and it adjusts how you would approach the rigor as well, because if something moves from second grade to third grade, obviously they're ready for more elevated content. It provides us an opportunity to do a full reset on what the kits are that we're purchasing, and we've been investigating new kits through various companies. What several teachers and Michelle Gabri-Huba have really settled on is one company in particular has these very comprehensive science kits. In order to, as you notice, it's a sizable investment. We would need to purchase many new kits, and then thereafter, once we own them, we send them out for refurbishment. And right now, we're still working out the plan, but some of these kits that we're buying are going to need to be refurbished 3 times to go to 3 different classrooms over the course of the year, because they move. We have so many, say, grade 3 classrooms across the district, or grade 2. So we're still working out some of the logistics behind the scenes, but we know the upfront investment needs to be pretty significant in order to purchase these kits, and then thereafter we're looking at the refurbishment costs of the kits. But I will come back to, as much as sometimes it feels like an external pressure to make this adjustment, there is a silver lining to that, which is great to have kids have a reset and teachers have a reset on hands-on instruction in the elementary classroom in the program.
I have a question. Will there be training provided?
They're absolutely.
It's not factored in yet.
It's not factored in. However, one of the key things is we have the elementary instructional coach and we have the AA for elementary math and science. And we've had multiple conversations. In fact, there was training this year. They didn't get a new kit per se, but new content they started integrating in. And for that unit, they did training on it at the summits. Challenges in terms of when you offer that training. We'd like the training to be just a little bit closer to when the teachers are at, and summits are in the fall, and some of the teachers weren't getting to that unit until the spring. So what we're working on is trying to have folks trained up to go, say, a month before they're going to be teaching that kit so that it is relevant and fresh for them. But we are also working on, the question is really, is there a PD plan to go with it? And there absolutely is.
Is this kind of like, I'll rent it for 3 years, and the cost per year will be higher than my buying it over 5 years? If I take it.
That's a great question.
If after 3 years the kit is obsolescent, then my equity in the thing isn't worth anything, and I've lost rather than gained by going with you.
We will actually own these kits, and what we're paying for is the refurbishment of them. So it's the addition, it's the upfront cost. Now, the more school districts that decide to buy these same, because we're going to have them managed by BOCES, we think, that's what we're in conversation with. The more school districts that go in, the overall lower the cost is, because they can buy these things in greater bulk, but we're still working out to know what that exact amount is. But over the course of time, we should be able to use them for multiple years, pay the upfront cost, and then just be paying the refurbishment. Like the coffee filters in that example, the markers dry out, the coffee filters need to be replaced. Sometimes the little, the rubber tip on the stopper that drips the water cracks or doesn't fit anymore, and that's what they work on refurbishing.
So again, I kind of pause on this one because this is where we hear about new standards, and I'm sure you as a board, how's this impacting us? Well, it's impacting us in many ways. Professional development, we do tons of professional development on that, but just a very simple way of I don't want to simplify it. I want to say simple is probably the wrong word. Much more concrete example of yes, there's a mandate, and we see the mandate, and then we ask ourselves, do we just react to the mandate? Because quite frankly, we just react to the mandate. We could just continue with renting the kits that we have right now. But that's not the quality experience that we want kids to have. So it becomes a question, are you satisfying a mandate, or are you enhancing the overall experience? And our focus is in enhancing the overall experience. So that's just one example of those kind of things. In the center here is where we really, really try to figure out things that, again, none of these things are in themselves very expensive. but the impact but they're all very impactful. And so kind of keep that in mind. And so we talk about equity and outcomes and service follow needs. And the board was aware. Last year we started the K Jumpstart program. A very, quite frankly, not a very costly program, but has huge impact on a lot of kids to give them a true start for the kindergarten experience. And so now we're looking to expand it out. Last year we started with Ranjan and Shattuck. Now we want to expand it out to all buildings. And so when you think about those kind of things, truly, that little bit of expenditure has that extra ripple effect. And so you'll hear that theme throughout. So we're looking forward to expanding that Jumpstart program. ENL support is always a big piece that we have to address. We're growing. The numbers of kids coming into our system that requires ENL support is growing. And so at elementary level, the 1.0 FTE is probably going to be, not probably, will be piecemeal in different areas because of where kids are. So again, not a significant dollar amount, but has the potential to have a significant impact on those students. Similarly, looking at some additional supports on the accelerated math side. And again, ENL at the high school. So you see that I'm not going to necessarily hit every bullet, but the one that I want to point out, though, is the TAP program. For a long time, and we're still looking at high school East program, again, because I think we still modify the High School East program, but the High School East Alternative Program has been very successful. Every year the board is invited to a graduation. And we see kids who graduate in August who probably wouldn't have otherwise graduated from high school, as an example. And so we struggled with last year thinking, we have kids coming into ninth grade, and we don't have a real wraparound support program for those kids. And we know that if kids don't walk out of ninth grade with their minimum 5 or so credits, it's going to be a long haul to graduate from high school. And so it's kind of one of those things that we need to do something more in high school, in High School West, in ninth grade building. So what you see there is that, trying to get starting that program and doing it so we're really wrapping around kids early, right away in their high school experience, wrap around kids so we won't have kids struggling all the way through those next 3 or 4 years of the education experience. So again, not a lot of significant money, but the significant impact. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but that's the whole theme. How can we make things relevant? How do we make sure that we're being impactful with the investments that we're making? Even here, you see girls golf. I didn't even realize it that we have girls that play on the boys golf team. And I'm thinking like, wow, shame on me for one, not knowing that. And two, shame on us for not, quite frank with you, providing opportunities where the girl golfers could be, or should I say the boy golfers could be competitive because the girls are kicking their butts in some instances. And so doing that is something that, again, someone say, why are you doing it? Well, it's an equity issue. It's truly an equity issue. Same thing with the co-ed piece. So when we start looking at some of the youngest women programs and those kind of things, and programs that's thriving, how do we make sure that we have opportunities for kids? And so those are just examples. Not a lot of money. Mr. Delato asked about, it's not necessarily FTE. We put 2 FTE out there. It's a stipend. It's just more of a placeholder piece that we say FTEs. We know we're going to hire 2 individuals on a stipend level. But those are just, again, some examples of when we start looking at equity and outcomes, we're looking at everything from academics to the whole gamut of experiences that kids have, and making sure that we have the capacity to address those things as we move forward. Under the special education domain, one of the areas that we're looking at very closely, and we still have to hash out this last piece here, is make sure we have the capacity of our administrative folks to really effective, not only just place kids. You see Mrs. Malahs come up. She does a great job of presenting the placements to the board. But what the board is seeing is just, quite frankly, the surface of a ton of work. The many meetings behind the scene that comes up in the presentation that's to you as a body. And so we're looking at some of what are we doing with some of our CPSE, preschool education, outside placement. How do we make sure that those things are effective? And so we're going to spend some time, and so this is giving us some capacity to spend some time to ask a question that when we look at our special education model, what are some changes from an administrative perspective that we can in fact make to not only make what I call the procedural things more effective, but also give people more time to look at the academic things. Because quite frankly, a lot of AAs in the spring, they spend all their time in meetings and very little time on the instructional side of it because they have to be in meetings. And so we start looking at some of those kind of things. And so we're going to unpack that a little bit more with Mrs. Smile on this and Dr. Wood and try to figure out some of those kind of things. This other one is a very small example of, again, that we have some kids with specialized needs. And so how do we then train? You asked about training, Mrs. Hoffman. How do we make sure that those aides, special education aides that are in those specialized programs, have that training to make sure that the experience is one, is a quality experience, and two, is a safe experience for those kids in those specialized programs. And so not a costly thing in the overall budget of $170 million, but a very impactful thing for those kids, those families, and those programs to know that all the people who are dealing with their kids are trained appropriately to deal with those kids. And that's something that we negotiated through the last CSC negotiation, so that people who are in these programs, we don't mind paying you more, but you're also going to be trained because we're paying you more. So we want to invest in you so you can do a better job in some of these specialized programs. And so that's just an example of that piece of it that we're talking about as we move forward. And the last piece over here, I'm going to ask Elizabeth to talk about this again a little bit. If you remember last budget, the one we're living in now, we put in $50,000 for these Future Ready grants, where we want teachers apply to do the Future Ready grants. And one of the things that and it was really, the high school East Library really sparked it when you walk in and you see the type of furniture that you see in the space. It creates a whole different dynamic, and we know it. And we have pockets of around the Shen Foundation gave a teacher at the grant. I think the person presented recently to the foundation about, and using the grant money to buy some specialized furniture in her class. I think it's 6th grade teacher, correct? And talk about how the dynamics of the class changed. And so we have these pockets of, if you want to say, our internal best practices. So we're not just reading something that some vendor put in a magazine and say, hey, everybody should buy this. We're looking at our experiences and saying, okay, based upon some of those experiences that we're seeing, how do we start to gradually evolve our classroom spaces so we more and more are doing that. But we want to do it in a way that we know that if you ask, I want X, Y, and Z, I'm going to ask, what do you expect X, Y, and Z to result? What's going to be, and not just, I just want pretty furniture. No, wrong answer. We could spray paint it and give you pretty furniture. So the question is, what do you expect is going to be different about the environment, the experience for kids, and those kind of things. And so now we're looking to up the ante with that a little bit. I don't know if you want to talk about where your furniture review process and some of the things you're talking about now.
Sure. We are working on getting sample, I'll say, future-ready furniture. In fact, you may have an opportunity to see some of it. We're going to take over the Gowanna Media classroom next week for about a week, and we've had vendors. Actually, Kathy's worked with Greg Mayo, our purchasing agent, to get samples from state contract approved, and also vendors that are reputable, have worked with the district over time. And we're going to have DIDIC come through and look at it. We're going to have teachers who have applied for the Future Ready grant and requested furniture come through and look at it, with the idea of getting some feedback on which types of furniture would best suit our system in Shenendehowa. Eventually working toward certain options, so that if you're a primary teacher, these are the options you can request when you demonstrate through some sort of grant application process that you take a different approach to instruction, that the profile of an engaged classroom is the center of what you're doing. Walking around today, I was with Mr. Gutschel for half an hour walking around West, and it was very interesting stopping in classroom after classroom and watching teachers who were doing some very innovative practices on their own, not that they knew we were coming, it's just what they were doing, and trying to force fit furniture to have students in group settings to do what they were trying to do. Those are the teachers that really need access to a different type of furniture so that it is more conducive. And that spans all levels. It's not just a 9th grade, it's a 1st grade, it's where you are doing the practices that need or would benefit from modernized furniture. We're going to give you access to apply for certain options of furniture, and really working to think what's the return on investment for the packages that we put together? Because I've seen in certain, I'll give Orangen as an example. walking through Oranjan, I saw some really innovative where they've infused just a few pieces in certain classrooms, and it has been transformative. And the idea that you need to wipe out all of the furniture to get a different feel or vibe or opportunity for students is just not accurate. And so how do we get information from some of the folks who've done that already to help put together some of these packages that teachers would apply for? That's the direction we're heading, but the funds here are really set aside for teachers who are interested in this sort of thing and would like to apply to have better classroom furniture options in their room to support advanced types of learning.
I mean, for now, they're getting to this through these grants, but if this is the direction that you're going, instead of buying the furniture that you're buying, you would shift to this. It's just, these are the people that are first out to try the furniture.
One of the things that be it one rollout, be it whatever, one of the things that as a district we have been very careful about not, we don't go to the grocery store hungry, using an analogy. Because you go to the grocery store hungry, everything you buy, you buy. And then you get home and realize, I don't even like it, but it looked good in the grocery store. And so we don't get caught into, just because it's the newest whatever. No, we really want to make sure that we start with how does this change or impact the experience of kids, and is this the best way to do it? Those three questions, the relevant piece, and those kind of so literally, and we're a large enough system that we can get enough best practice examples within our system to say, is this something that we want to systematize? And once we get to that point, then you know what, in the future it won't be a grant thing. Because remember when we started rolling out one-to-one technology 6 years ago, we started with a grant piece because we wanted to get a feel that, are people ready to use this stuff? Versus, are we just going to buy a bunch of computers and we hope that they're using it? Versus, no, we want to kind of till the soil and see how it grows, and then all of a sudden everybody else wants a nice flowery garden, and so all of a sudden, boom, that's what we have. And so that's been our approach to things, and for some people probably think, it's a little slow, but this is not a sprint. This is about how do we evolve our system, fundamentally evolve our system, that it's not, as here, you saw Dr. Wood, our deputy superintendent, talking about furniture. You probably think, isn't it like operations or facilities folks that's supposed to be worrying about furniture? If we were simple about replacing it, yeah, it would be. It would be, hey, Barb, give us an inventory of all the desks and chairs, tell them how many you need, and Barb do a great job of replacing them and drop them in. Life is good. She's satisfied with the job. Well, yes, that's a part of it. However, what's the impact of it? And that's where the different conversation starts. And so I didn't want you to miss that piece of it, that this conversation is being spearheaded by Dr. Wood, not facilities operations. Facilities operations supported the conversation to make sure that then what we do, we can actually distribute and those kind of things in the right way. So again, those are the things that are beyond the numbers, if you will, of the budget itself that I think the board should certainly have that appreciation of.
And this is in addition to, like through Shen Foundation and through Global Foundries, because I've noticed that there's big grants along the same lines.
And we promote, we encourage people to be innovative and entrepreneurial in their perspective, but on the same note, you're not just going to buy junk just because you got money. It's going to fit into the larger sequence of what we need and see where we're going. To pick up pace a little bit here, some of the bigger cost piece of it, the debt service piece, and you're going to see, we've been talking about, when we get in with Kathy, talk about some numbers, our debt, we've been watching it, our 2030 construction plan. As a board recall, and we just had the 2 past referendums, and the whole notion is, as debt mature, so in other words, we're paying less, and we bring a project on board. In fact, next year we'll be paying less in debt service than we were paying last year in debt service, and we just brought 2 projects on board. And somebody say, how can it be? Well, it's a future present thing. We didn't think about 2018 in 2018. We thought about 2018 and 2014 and 2013 and different years when the market was going up and down and we could refinance and get lower rates and all those kind of things. We were thinking about all those things, thinking about how it's going to impact us 3-5 years out. And so now 3-5 years out, we're reaping the benefits of that. In the same note, 3-5 years out, we're still thinking next 3-5 years out. So the sequence is always there. And so you'll see in later on when Mrs. Chase come aboard, you'll see we're going to reduce our debt line by $500,000, and so it creates capacity to do other things within the budget. So again, the footprint doesn't change. You know, the cost footprint doesn't change, but we could do more things within it. And these are costs that it's not, oh, we're going to drop $500,000 today, but we're going to go up $700,000 tomorrow. No, we're looking at trajectory. And it's either going to be flatlined or reducing. And so we know that opportunities are going to continue at least for the foreseeable future. In the foreseeable future for us, and you remember that we did a 3-year forecast piece, we do that 3-year thing because it's a legitimate look. 5 years kind of start becoming too, we don't know, but the 3 years give us a pretty good handle on what things might be. So that's just an example of some of those kind of things. I mentioned the full decade. We'll talk more about it once we do the futures report because this budget doesn't have necessarily any direct financial implications. On the instructional side, some things that we're doing, you heard the mirrors and windows concept that even in the mid-years goals, you heard people talking about that. How do we look at the literature of what kids are reading in classrooms, what are kids exposed to? And so not a large amount of some additional funds that we're going to add to our instruction materials that's focused on that. Focus on that because, you know, it's one thing to say something, another thing to do something about it. This is to do something about it. And so how do we really look at classroom sets that what teachers have in the classroom libraries or schools have in, not the library, but in their book rooms that kids go and access. So what are those type things as we move looking forward? Mental health is a continuous piece for us. The board has been very supportive. This past year, even midstream, we upped the contract for Saratoga Center for the Family. And it's one of those that we're going to constantly monitor. And if it requires for us to increase the contract, we'll come back to the board. So we want to continue that relationship with them because it's been very positive for our students and families. And so we certainly want to continue that piece of it as well. The instructional coach, we have the current instructional coach is 6'8". We want to expand that person to really bridge the gap between what we're doing in high school and middle school when it comes to instructional technology because we're seeing it now. It's really clicking. And not only that, you have the kids. The kids are going through the system. And so now high school kids are their first year sequence, but now you have middle school kids who have been at it for 2 or 3 years. So how do we make sure we have that seamless progression? So we want to expand that role moving forward into the next dimension, if you will. A big support piece that says K-8 reading, but actually came out of the special education side. Mrs. Malad and some of her folks looking at, you know, what are some of the challenges that certain special, in fact, probably a larger handful of our special education kids have. And so we started unpacking and said, so what are some of the reading approaches that we're taking, particularly at the earlier grades, with certain students, if not all students. And so this is a first blush, if you will, as some professional development to unpack some of that. And I say first blush because I'm not a fan of, as I said, maybe it's just my bias. If somebody, don't tell me that something is good. I want to see it. I want to see it not only once, but I want to see it multiple times that it's good before I'm convinced that it's good. And so we're going to spend a lot of professional. We're doing that right now, Mr. Smiley, a lot of folks, a lot of PD with teachers around that piece of it. So we want to invest some additional funds in it to make sure that we build a capacity to do it. And as we build a capacity, then we expand the resources to effectively address that because we know that's such a key part for all kids. But particularly, as I said, this came out of the special education side in terms of looking at the reading piece of it. And so again, you asked the question that, that's not a special education thing. Well, everything is everyone's responsibility. The responsibility piece that we talked about before, it's everyone's responsibility to look at kids and say, why are they struggling here and not here? And it's not, oh, well, I shouldn't be asking that question because that's not my domain. Well, if you see a question, ask the question because someone else probably didn't realize it was a question to be asked, and then we have to find an answer to address it. So that's something that we're really going to look at, spend some time and really make sure that we're doing the right things and not just doing the things because it's popular or whatever, but really doing the right things to be impactful for kids. So we're pretty excited about some of the work that's happening here with this piece of it. Articulation agreements. The board has heard, and we're in the process now of, and I'm going to have Elizabeth talk about this a little bit too, because we offer a lot of great programs, particularly in the engineering, tech, CTE domain, but our programs haven't been formalized under the state pathways for CTE, and we've been offering great programs for years. And so now we're looking at that process, and we're going to have Elizabeth talk about some of the work that that Rose Barra is leading a lot of quality work on that piece of it. Not only the CTE, but Elizabeth can mention briefly to the board too, how of our relationship that we're trying to reform, if you will, or reinvigorate, probably a better word, with Hudson Valley in some of their programmings for various departments, but certainly the tech one is one that we know we're going to get off the ground in the spring and moving into September.
It was interesting because, moving into the position, I knew we had great tech programs at the high school, and business and family and consumer science, and it took a while for me to realize that they really weren't approved by the state in terms of a formal designation of a career and technical education pathway. And you do a little more digging and you realize it is because the state has very specific requirements in order to consider these approved pathways. So one of the benefits of having a dedicated person, Rose Barra, in that position is she's been able to do some of the legwork behind it and work with the local, their state ed has folks in the field who help districts set these programs up, but working on getting a financial literacy component in, because every single approved pathway the students must have a half-year financial literacy component. They must have, there are many requirements. One must be like a hands-on experience. One must be a college credential, like a college course as part of the sequence. Well, at the same time, we started having more conversations with Hudson Valley and saying there have to be more. We know a number of our students go there, and we know probably even more of our students should, because they offer some wonderful trade programs in construction where our students can walk out and get great employment in terms of a good return on their education investment right away. Electricians, they are dying for more electricians, and those students they're getting job offers while they're in their 2-year credential program for like something very livable incomes, right, that you can sustain long term. So we went to, in fact, all the AAs at the secondary level, and we had Dr. Robinson and I had a meeting with them first, and then we went and did a tour of the facilities, and meanwhile, in the background, Rose is striking up all these great connections while we're there, and she's seeing what their offering is, and before we've left, she's made appointments for them to come check out our program. And the initial was, well, we're not sure that your programs quite meet. By the time they left Shen, they were like checking on the box, like, the auto program is great, we're, good to go. The electrical, well, we'll have more conversation about that. But moral of the story, by our outreach and our focus and additional conversations, we really are providing more opportunities for students. And so the CTE pathways will be going to IPAC. I think it's in the April IPAC meeting, with more to come, and the credentialing option being available next year. But there are some costs associated with that, and that we have to give formal state-approved assessments. The other thing that we're doing, which is not directly related to the CTE pathway, but just enhancing the CTE program in general, is trying to make sure our students in those courses, our auto courses, are taking field trips to dealerships, are going to Hudson Valley and seeing what the auto program there looks like, so that they have some idea about, now I've taken this 2-credit course, what do I do with it? And really helping to bridge the gap between just a pure high school course and how this can lead into a possible career.
Perhaps, some of this that we're doing, we have to do for ourselves. But I couldn't help but think about, when you're describing all of these interfaces and so forth, Joe Dragoni, he spends full time. This is his job, or he has made it his job, to interface for workforce development in all kinds of agencies. And given the fact that he's developed all these relationships, is there some way we can coattail on some of that so we don't have to do it for ourselves?
No, we are tapping into a lot of those things. And one of the things that, so BOCES, remember, BOCES span a wide variety of districts. Right. Districts that have nothing at all that need programming, and districts like us that we have a lot of programming that we're fine-tuning structure. Right. So while we have programs in-house, we still send about 80 plus kids to various BOCES programs as well. And we're looking at some of those partnerships, those collaborations that they're doing, and as they're appropriate and consistent with our model, definitely tapping into those type of things, because you're right, it's the collective working responsibility kind of approach to things, and and they're trying to do, even take for instance the P-TECH movement. We're watching that whole movement and see how that's going to pan out between Honason site, Watervliet site, and what does that mean? What are lessons learned for us that could impact our site? When I say our site, so tie this into a bigger picture for the board, we're in the process now of the design process for the reconstruction of the technology wing. So as we're thinking about the reconstruction of the technology wing, we're thinking about all these type things that we were talking about in this budget cycle. We're thinking about opportunities out there. So if we're going to, for instance, if the capital project goes as planned and we build an additional space that provides for the construction program, which pretty much kind of shuts down in the wintertime because the kids they're not out in the winter, and all of a sudden we have the capacity to do that, then we enhance other programming in that we're currently not offering that looks at the labor market projections and how we try to build those capacities. So again, it's always one of those kind of things where, here we're talking about $10,000 between assessments and field trips and those. Not a lot of money, but the impact of it is significant because this first year, if you want to say, provides us that point when we bring online the new wing in 2020 or 2021, depends on how long the state takes to get things approved. We're ready to maximize the capacity and not thinking, oh, we have great space and what are we going to do with it? Versus we know what we want to do with the space. We just can't wait for the space to come online. We can't come online fast enough. So, and that's where some of those partnerships come into place as well. So absolutely, great question. On the safety side, I just want to take some time because, we a couple years ago, we had some people make accusations that district's not doing enough for safety. We do a lot for safety. And just an example, today, kudos to Mrs. Carmen and Mr. Cameron who organized, and maybe it could be others folks, but those are two that I thought were some of the lead organizing a safety training for our district level safety team. Because when things happen in the building administrator, he or she becomes a person takes the lead for that. But if that particular issue goes outside of the scope or the dimension of the building, it becomes a district level thing. Or even if it's something even within the building but severe enough, it has a district. So we went through this whole piece of it. And irony, here I am in San Diego at 7 o'clock in the morning, trying to interface with some of these folks who are here at 10 o'clock doing a safety training. And one of the questions I asked, and I'm not sure if people realize why I asked the question, I asked, who's the incident commander? Oh, and the reason why I knew is because in my absence, Elizabeth has become acting as superintendent. She can't be the incident commander. So someone has to be designated to that. So I wanted to catch to see, and Mrs. Bush was, so the big part of the reason I'm saying this is that everyone needs to understand everyone's roles and responsibility, because emergencies don't happen when it's convenient. It's always an inconvenient time that someone's not there, but someone else needs to be able to step up. And so this is just an example of a training piece that we went through. Another example, and I asked Mr. Karam to at some point in the spring to come back and share with the board. He's been doing tons of training with the TSA, coming in and looking at our transportation system and scrutinizing so many things that you and I don't even think about. And so I say that because we don't broadcast those things to John Q. Public because we're not doing it for publicity. We're doing it to preserve the safety of our students and our staff. And so we do those things very carefully. And so when you start talking about safety, we do everything from right now, transition our radios. We have radios that because of, so we're going to digital radio so you could go district wide and not having, okay, this radio only work from this building to that building, and then we have to get another radio. Next thing you're carrying 3 radios and 4 cell phones. So those kind of things. So simple things that you look at it and say, and getting the repeaters to make sure we can broadcast. Not a lot of money, but you find yourself in that crisis mode, and you need to have multiple people communicating from different distances. All of a sudden, this seems like pennies in comparison to the impact that you need to have. And so that's one example of that. The high school is looking at restructuring of monitors and different people within the high school capacity. So we're looking at those kind of things. So it's a placeholder, and a lot of conversation will be with Mr. Agostino and think about, make sure that the people we have or the right people trained appropriately before we add people, because I'm not a big fan of just adding people just because. Just make sure we have the right people trained and right assignments, and so some capacity to do some things differently. The driver training that I just mentioned, transportation. Transportation is when you think about it, we transport, 13,000 kids roughly from between Shen kids, outside kids, a lot of kids, but oftentimes people don't think about safety on buses and the training that our drivers have to go through to make sure that things are safe on our buses. And so under Mr. Cameron, a lot of safety on transportation safety we've been looking at. The last piece down here is something that, sometimes when people leave out of a position, you realize the gaps that you have. And so we've had some shifts in some of our operations departments, and it shows some glaring gaps in terms of having our own folks with specialized training from everything from asbestos to water testing, all these regulatory things that one person had. That person is no longer in the equation. You have huge exposure to us as a system. And so, okay, let's learn from that and make sure that we have multiple people with those specialized things, so we're not relying on any one person. And so that's focus on that. That came from a glaring, like, whoa, we got a problem here, because if one person controls everything, that's a problem for us as a system. So how do we go take a step back and get, again, a lot of cross-training, multiple people, so we don't have, particularly some of the mandated type things that we need to have people specialize in. So some of those specialized training is a big part of that. Related to that, too, is even our training for our custodians. If you recall, under Barb, we've been doing the CMI, Custodian Management Institute, for our custodians. So we did the custodian cleaners, and now we're going to start to get our supervisors, not our operations supervisors, as Kathy was saying to me, our food service people, our transportation people, people who are in spaces who need to understand what's the dynamic of space. I'm using Katie. Katie needs to know that, okay, yeah, she knows about the cleanliness, all the food standards, but what does that actually mean from a bigger picture perspective? How do we get everyone else to walk into a space and realize that it's everyone's responsibility to make sure the space is safe, the space is clean, and not just the person who's doing the cleaning? This is when we miss the mark. And so how do we look? So I'm sharing those kind of things because those are the type things that people don't think about safety, but everyone needs to have an eye. If I walk into a library and I see something that's, or I'll give an example. I know a training in the L's, well, whatever. I'm not going to talk about that one, give it away. Somebody walks into a library and they see something that, that's kind of odd. And not just simply say it's kind of odd and just walk away. Say it's kind of odd, and I need to inform somebody that I saw something that was kind of odd. And, it could be nothing, but we had a situation, perfect example, we had a situation on the bus. A young person left a little device on the bus with a little note. Turned out to be nothing, but somebody had to see it and realize this is kind of odd. And because it's odd, I need to minimally tell someone else that I see something or saw something that's kind of odd. So the point is, whole piece of, when we think about safety, it's everything, and it's everyone. And so how do we make sure then that we're providing the training capacity for all those individuals? And clearly, negotiations, as you know, we're in the process of negotiating, and typically, in case people ask, we look at what was the last settled amount, and we just roll that amount forward. And so we know what we're paying now, and so we kind of budget that sequence moving forward. So it's not foreshadowing or forecasting of what we think we might pay. We just simply know what we paid in the past negotiated contract. So I'll stop there before I turn the page. Good? And I'll pick up the pace a little bit. So these things we already mentioned here. On the enrollment side, enrollment has been relatively flat. So we're not seeing a lot of changes as a result of enrollment. We're seeing some every here and there, some, art and music and PE, always those sectioning things. It's kind of like the odd, you got this, and so we always have to add an additional section here, additional section here. So this is that mixed bag of things that we have to look at the elementary level. Similarly, music, we're looking at some things additional for lessons, making sure that we have ample lessons or the lessons aren't too large. Again, not a significant dollar amount, but certainly change experience for kids. High school social studies is one of those areas that we have been focused on a pure enrollment, large sections. So how do we try to minimize, reduce some of those high school social studies enrollment sections? So that's a target area we're looking at. We're looking at science. Science is still debatable, to be honest with you, as we stand here today. Because we're looking at that and saying, okay, looking at some of the science courses, do we impact that first, or do we impact something else at some point in the future? But right now, that's one of those areas. But the high school social studies is certainly one that we want to try to address class size enrollments overall.
Is that because of the change breaking the honors away from the American Studies?
No.
It's
Just numbers. It's a sheer numbers thing.
Well, I didn't know if it was an anticipation that more would be going into.
No.
No, it's not from that?
No,
Okay.
because every student takes social studies every year, so
Yeah.
that it's a defined cohort regardless of what we
So
offer.
just sheer numbers.
Just
coming
sheer
in.
numbers. Yeah, just a
Okay.
numbers thing. Again, pick up the pace a little bit. This is one that I put on here, and I'm calling it Allied Health. It's probably going to be something else, and it's probably, we may not get around to start in September, but it's one of those things that when you talk about under the CTE umbrella, we have kids to say, hey, I want to go into nursing, and we have some kids go to the BOCES program, or we have kids that want to go into, so we're great for kids who say I want to go to college, pre-med, and med school because we offer AP biology, AP chemistry, AP physics, AP everything. But what about the kid who is not that kid but still want to go into health services? And so one of the things, and again, this is true to placeholder because I started having some conversation with Mrs. Barrer about we need to start looking at that, because when you start looking at the labor market and where the jobs are, and yes, we're not in the business of preparing kids for jobs, but we should be exposing kids for what the labor market is looking at, trends are looking at. So this is one of those areas that not a lot that we're looking at. Maybe try to do something with a section to feel it out, see what it's like, and if it's something that we want to expand moving forward as well. So at some point we'll be having those conversations in the spring. I'm not sure if we'll be timely enough to have for IPAC, but it becomes relevant when we start a conversation. We just need to start a conversation. And so that's one of those areas that we're looking at as we move forward. Charter schools, believe it or not, we have kids who live in the community who go to charter schools, largely in Albany. And so we always have to up the ante for those additional kids going to charter school. And again, the technology piece, we're looking at Chromebook expansion down to 4th grade, and really trying to get to that part where we kind of have a much more seamless as kids coming from those 2 years in elementary going to the middle, so it becomes truly part of the fabric of those kind of things as we move. So not a lot of major expenditures on this side of the coin, but I just wanted to point that one out as a part of how we're looking at building the capacity for students as they're coming through our system. Mr. Della.
Now I'm thinking, BOCES has the center in Mohanison. Boston Spa has a center on the tech campus, and they're highly specialized CTEs, if you will. As we move into the new STEM center, or STEAM center, are there things that we could be looking at, not that would replicate any of those efforts, but things that would, we could really emphasize, that would really be, crown jewels, you might say, that would really serve a need?
So the answer to that is yes. The piece that you didn't ask, but I'll offer a thought is our plan, though, is not at this juncture to be, say, a Mohanison site where other kids from other places are coming to. So we're building it to hopefully expand our internal capacity, so we could get more kids who and I, again, to personalize it, my kid who was a artist kid who should have been taking animation class at Shen, because that's what he wanted to do, but he never thought we'd think of it because it's an engineering type thing versus it's not an engineering type thing. So how do we expand that offering? And so we look at math and science differently in those spaces.
The specialization is what I really was getting at, not that it would be shared with other kids.
So that's why I said the first part of yes, we want to be able to have spaces that are flexible, to have multiple discipline either coming together for interdisciplinary opportunities and or multiple disciplines using spaces in different ways. And so that's the model that we're moving towards. Absolutely. So I want to pick up the pace a little bit for the board, but again, I want just to spend the time to talk about the things. Before Kathy comes aboard, one of the big things that we look at repurposing, and so I know Mr. Delata asked about, so we know we have 13 retirees as of today, and I say as of today, who knows by the end of the year, we're going to have. So when we look at that, we look at, okay, it creates opportunities for us. Because we know a person who's retiring is retiring at this step, and the person who we're hiring at this step. So it creates opportunities. And so it creates opportunities to do all those, so all these things that we spoke of over here are being offset by here. And so while we're talking about add here, we have to think about, okay, if we don't have new funds come in, how do we create a net zero effect by other things that's happening within the budget itself? And so this is just a breakdown of the retirees that we have right now, and we use the average around step 4 replacement costs for incoming staff. And we say average because sometimes we're above step 4, sometimes we're below step 4. So we use the average for that piece of it. So it creates some repurposing opportunities in terms of repurposing of dollars to do some of the things. And the things that we just went through before, a lot of them are going to be offset by some of these pieces. Similarly, on the operational side, we look at things like the debt service reduction. Creates an opportunity for us. Looking at some changes in special education that creates, so we're talking about looking at special education admin capacity, and we have a potential offset on the other side of it, so it becomes a net zero effect for us. And so somebody say, how can you add a new person? Well, because we're not doing something over here that allows us opportunity to do something else over here that's going to be more impactful. So this gives you some sense of some of the things that we look at. How do we look at try to control costs? And all these things, you know, the same way all the little small pieces add up, all these pieces add up and create this kind of net zero effect on the budget itself. And so that's why I wanted to highlight the repurposing pieces as we go through the budget process. And I'm going to have Kathy kind of highlight. So what you see here, if you so kind of what you say, what's new in the budget? What's new in the budget are these things in red. And these things in red overall are very costly. The biggest part of the budget is preserving existing programs. So just keep that in mind. I mean, 95% of the budget is keeping what we're doing, and then we spend a lot of time, quite frankly, to figure out how we're going to do with the 5% plus. And so when you really think about it, but the 5% plus is you know the whole adage of the straw that breaks the camel back, but it's also the straw that could also relieve the burden. So the racehorse could win the race. I'm trying to come up with that analogy that makes sense. But you know what I'm trying to get to with that piece of it. So we do all those kind of things to get to what Kathy's going to do and highlight some of the big picture costs, and then we'll kind of see how this plays out at the end.
Good evening. Just to put this in context, we start with this year's adopted budget as a starting point. We just did our mid-year in our 3-year projection, so it gives us an idea of where we think we're going to land this year and kind of where we're trending. The next column shows contractual and trend increases or decreases. So all of our negotiating contracts, our vendor contracts, trending with supply costs, those kinds of things. Then we deal with our strategic increases or decreases, and those are purposeful changes that we're making in order to prioritize some of those strategies we just talked about. So as you can see, this first page highlights the 3 different categories of salaries. They increase somewhere between 3 and 5% in each line, and the salaries themselves constitute about 81% of our budget. So talking about, you know, how much of it's actually flexible, this is a big part of the salary and program budget. Oops. So the next page is showing some of our equipment, contractual, and BOCES costs. Equipment, we try to keep fairly steady, but we did add $150,000 or so for those future ready grants that we talked about. There's also some IMS and some radio equipment monies in here as well. The contractual costs stayed pretty flat. Textbook and library also stays pretty flat. We maximize our aid. It's based on the number of students that we have, X amount per student. Certainly that's not going up, but it's staying pretty stable. The BOCES costs, we're going to see some increase there. That's the $200,000 on the strategic side for those elementary science kits. And we also had some increase on the IMS side as a result of some of the savings that we saw on the
So
repurposing
Kathy,
slide.
just pause for a second.
Mhm.
So the board knows, a lot of our technology, we go process through BOCES. So we don't, yeah, and the kits are through, so what we don't want to, we can't create a computer graveyard. We're not going to build a warehouse space to keep old computers. And so it creates the opportunity for us to make sure that we recycle it through and have fairly current technology all the time. Same thing with the kits. We'll purchase the kits, then the refurbishing will go through the BOCES. So that's where Kathy's talking about.
Moving on to supplies, again, fairly flat. Operations, maintenance, about a third. Operations and maintenance, academic and IMS accounts for the strategic increases there. So benefits, we're actually seeing a reduction on the strategic side, and in total, as we talked about, we had about 200,000 increase in the health insurance, but the TRS side is what gave us that flexibility to have a reduction here that we can then repurpose some monies for. So that worked out nicely there. On the transfer to other funds, the bottom line is the debt service. That's where we're saving about 500,000 there. The trajectory is a decrease from here on out until we start adding debt back again, which we will start doing as we have some of those projects come on board. But our budget line for debt service is not going to increase. We have a debt service reserve that will continue to make that stable, if not decreasing. And then in total, you'll see that our budget increase is about 3.8 million or 2.22%.
So let's just pause there for a second for the board for questions. Mrs.
Kathy,
Stevens.
can you go one more time over that last one? I'm so sorry. Your last,
This one?
yeah.
The debt service one?
So the debt service, we have a $500,000 decrease.
Yeah.
And if you, you probably don't recall in our budget book last year, you'll see that in our debt service fund, we anticipate our debt service funding from the general fund side to just continue to decrease. Even as we add the projects that we have coming online, it's still going to decrease. So we're in really good shape on the capital project side and debt service side. But this is our mortgage payment.
And then you flipped the page really quick and you were saying something. Did we just?
And then the next
we just
page
came
is the
here.
grand
Okay,
total,
all right.
2.22% increase. Last year, we were 2.19. Yep, as you can see, oddly enough, 2 years in a row, we were 2.19, 2.22, so right in that ballpark with an average of 2.08 over the 5 years. The three-part budget, you can see, is very stable. Our administrative piece is 9.3% the last 2 years, projected for this next year as well as this year. We were at 9.54. I mean, hundreds of a percent difference.
I was looking at that bar graph earlier, and I didn't realize that it was regressing instead of increasing. I don't understand why the capital expenditure is going up when we've got $500,000 less.
Yeah, the years here on the bottom.
Yeah,
You're right.
right,
Typically, it's opposite. We go there.
Right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Right.
That was a test to make sure that you. So any questions? So the reason I'm kind of pausing, certainly want the board to contemplate what we shared tonight and ask questions during the coming week, because the process starts to come to a close, if you will. And it is, and I say that because, you know, how hopefully the board could appreciate all the background work that's done to present something so you as board members could fully understand the impact of what this budget's going to be. That's the reason why I want to spend more time on those items in red, so you can really know that, yeah, these are the things that we're looking to impact next year with the budget. And all the things that we've been doing well, we're going to look to continue those too, because if there was something that we're going to be cutting, I would have been saying, hey, we're going to cut this because of X, Y, and Z. So since we didn't have that conversation, you could have then good confidence that we'll continue the things that we're doing very well. And some things will change to doing better, but we want to do certain things. We may change how we do it, but we're not going to change what we do, so to speak. So I think the boards need to have that appreciation. Ms. Stevens.
So you say the process is done. However, actually, the process is really ramping up because now we have to make sure that the community,
Oh, yeah.
that's
Oh, yeah.
always,
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's a bigger,
Yeah, the detail
You know what I
aspect
mean?
of the process,
Yeah.
absolutely. The detail, the behind-the-scene details of it. And, you know, and Kathy has hundreds of spreadsheets with all sorts of numbers that we kind of go through, the tick and tie, she called it, to make sure everything is accountable for, everything works. So to make sure that we have a high degree of confidence, and when we say to you as a board that, yeah, our budget is going to be 2.2, you know, so if it's 2.11 versus 2.3, we know that's we're going to be in the ballpark. We can't say March 12th, yeah, we're going to be 2.2, and then March 26th, oh yeah, we kind of forgot about this. It's actually going to be 4.5. No, you know, in fact, we might come back saying, yeah, we squeeze some other things, or quite frankly, because of revenue opportunities, we may be adding some things that still have a net zero impact on taxes. You know, so you may hear that because you may see or hear of an opportunity with the state budget that may present itself to do certain things. But which kind of goes into the next piece I think is important for you to talk about on the revenue side, to see how this is one year, right? Yep.
Right. So this compares our adopted budget for 18-19 with our budget based on the tax cap for 19-20, as well as the preliminary budget that we just presented. So our tax cap is 3.97%, but that would drive a budget increase of 3.25%, or $175 million. The budget we're presenting is a 2.22% increase at 177.5%.
Does this graphic make sense?
It's saying that if we wanted to go all the way up to the tax cap, we could go to 179.
Right.
And also, I guess what's not being said is that this is based on the worst case scenario, or at least I hope.
On the revenue side.
On the revenue
Yes.
side, so
Yeah.
hopefully it will be something north of what our governor proposed,
Yeah.
and
In fact,
then
perfect,
we'll have more flexibility.
perfect segue here.
So again, comparing 18-19 to 19-20, you'll see that the two budget numbers, 2.19, 2.22, the tax cap is 3.97 this year. Last year it was 3.65%. Last year, our budget, based on our expenditures projected, was 2.92%. This year, we're at 2.52%. So we're 1.45% less than the tax cap, and last year we were 0.73 below the tax cap.
So, good, Mr.
You know, I don't know whether our community fully appreciates the difference between what you have been able to accomplish here and what many school boards and districts are facing. It didn't happen by accident. It wasn't luck. It's sound, thoughtful management that has made the difference. There are districts that are not talking about adding 13 people, but cutting 13 people, and they don't have the size of the workforce that we have, so the impact on their district is going to be much greater. I hope that the people will continue to support us as they have been wonderfully in the past, but not only because we are delivering a good product, but because it is done so cost effectively and so wonderfully based on long-term planning and smart strategy. I really hope so.
Mr. Parsons, were you going to say something?
The line that says property taxes budget levy, is that built around the assumption of a very conservative amount from the state?
So it does take in consideration the state aid revenues here. And the state aid, we can wait till that box falls. The state aid revenue is based on the governor's proposal.
Okay.
And so if we get more state aid revenue, obviously it offsets the tax levy. And so when we build our budget, we really, so again, back to Mr. DeLallo's point, we build a budget starting to think about what's best for kids, you know, and not apologizing for it. We want to provide great options and opportunities for our students. And so because of that, then we're going to analyze everything. And that's where the conversation here with Dr. Woods, just a couple examples of things that we analyze closely. Or Kathy in her office making sure that we're taking the time, or Jill in HR making sure that the people who we have on staff or the people we have accounted for in the budget, or Michelle Mallard looking at special education program and say, hey, if we want to impact graduation for special education students, we have to do some things differently. Or Mrs. Carmen that's looking at safety and saying, hey, what are the various things we do? I could go on and on and on, and you'll hear Mr. Karen come and talk about bus purchases and some of the new things that we're looking on buses to enhance safety on buses. So the whole piece of it, we have these very comprehensive conversations all the time. We just don't have them in March and try to add some numbers together and say, call a budget. We have these conversations all the time, and that's a part of our constant evaluation of program effectiveness. So when we get to this point, we can do the worst case scenario and say, worst case scenario is this. We know what we want to do, need to do. What does that worst case scenario look like? And does it provide some constraints that we now have to go back and reprioritize some things or massage some things to put out to our taxpayers a reasonable budget? And another piece too, I want to point out that we're talking about what's the tax levy impact here. It's not the tax rate impact, because if you recall last year, this year, most residents in the town of Clifton Park and Half Moon saw 0 to very negligible impact on their taxes. And so the tax levy amount doesn't translate to what the tax rate amount is going to be. And we know that the tax rate amount is going to be significantly lower for taxpayers. It's not going to be 2.5%. It's going to be, quite frankly, something fluctuating around 0 to 1%. And so that's also the piece that, well, we can't do that now because there's so many other factors that have to take into place that determine the tax rate that we'll do in August. You have that presentation, but we keep that in mind as we're building the budget process. And last piece I want to make on this is that you're right, Mr. Delano, there are a lot of places that cut in, and they're still looking to push their budget to the maximum tax cap and still make a reduction. And you know, and we're fortunate. I think we're fortunate as a community, we're fortunate as a school to have one, a great supportive community. Two, we also have a lot of very thoughtful people on board that get it. They get it that we're not here to waste money. They get it that what we spend money on should have an impact on kids. People get it. And, you know, and so we want to make sure that each year we add some value so people realize that, yeah, you know, we're not just being frugal, we're being very thoughtful about what we do and keep building our capacity as a system all the time.
Can I ask one more question? You know the letter that was sent out today about the consolidation of the expense-based aid?
Yep.
Does this take that into consideration?
So that would have, and we don't have the breakdown, but within the state aid, there are many categories that make into state aid. And so it wouldn't impact this year so much if it's the reimbursement aid, it's transportation, it's textbooks, it's all those kind of BOCES aid. So for 1920, if that proposal had gone through, wouldn't have impacted so much. It's beyond 1920 that we were really concerned about. So this takes in consideration pretty much, as you see here, 47.2 to 47.8 is pretty flat line.
Right.
When you think about additional revenue, it's like nothing. When you think about that large sequence of things. I just want to, so the bottom line, you saw the bottom line that Kathy pointed out, and we still keeping the fund balance reserve where we are, and kind of end up where we started. That this whole budget process is an exercise for us as a system to evaluate our effectiveness, and it's also an opportunity for us to reinvest as well as invest additional resources to enhance our capacity on behalf of the students that we serve. Thoughts, questions, criticisms people may have?
Always a great problem.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
So again, as the week goes by, if questions come up, ask. You know, if you clarification, please ask, because you as board members, you're ambassadors. It's going to go from me, hand off from you, for you adopting it, and it becomes yours, and then we start selling it to the public, and then the public adopt it, then becomes everyone's. You know, so it's important to do so. So I'm going to shift gears and have Mr. Karam come. One of the things that we do every year is bus proposal, and it's and you'll hear from Alan. You'll not only hear, but you'll see that the whole theme of consistency is important because, if you do things well, you should get similar good outcomes. So once you figure out how to do it well, the question is how do you make sure that year after year you keep doing it well so you get similar outcomes. So Mr. Cameron's going to talk about some of the buses things. Do you want me to, or you could click through?
Use the wheel, go forward.
Yeah, I just use the wheel.
Good evening. So, let's talk about the bus replacement plan. I share this with you every year, the criteria, just kind of remind you that some of the things that we'll look for when we think about which buses that we need to replace. And this is the why of a bus replacement plan. For me, the 5 bullets tell us the why we should replace the buses. The biggest point is creating predictability in our fleet and how we manage it, and also keeping that budget in terms of the bus purchase flatline from year to year. The average age of the fleet right now, we're at 6.6, pretty good. A lot of our buses still under warranty, which helps keep maintenance costs down. I share with you here some of the actual route miles that we put on from year to year. That's daily, as you can see on the right side. It's been pretty consistent. And this is the past 5-year bus replacement plan. Again, we're trying to keep it flatline as much as possible, stay within our needs, not necessarily our wants. And for this year, we're asking for a purchase of 20 buses, and as we've done in past years, we will auction off or we will repurpose those buses that were taken out of the fleet, and I'll be sharing with you a little story about that here shortly. So we're looking at the 20 buses, 14 are large, 72 passengers, and the others are small Type A buses for about $2.2 million bus proposition. I'm sure you've seen the news about the tablets that we've introduced. These are specific to routing. They're similar to what you use in your car, but the only thing you're going to see out of those is the particular route that we upload for that driver that's going out. This is going to enhance the safety for our substitutes. Not all of our employees come from Clifton Park, so they're not really familiar with the road network. This is going to help those that are coming out of town find their way through the community and make sure that we're dropping our students off at their stops. It also shows them pictures of the students at the stop. While they're driving, this system goes dark and they only hear the audible so that there's not the distraction. Currently, some drivers who aren't using the tablet, they're using sheets of paper with instructions on them, left, right, stops, so forth and so on. So it's kind of difficult to drive and read at the same time, right? I also want to share with you that besides home to school, school to home, which is a primary mission for school transportation, we do a lot of other things. This is 2015, 16, 16, 17, 17, 18, the number of different trips that we've done on yellow buses. We've done more trips than that in terms of contracting, but these are trips for sports, shuttles, field trips, regional trips, inter-schools, activities, student services, so forth and so on. So we do a lot to enhance and support the educational program for our students. And talking about repurposing, this is an example of a Type A bus, a small yellow bus that you see on the road that we repurposed and converted to an EMS vehicle. The conversion cost for us is on average about $3,500. To replace that vehicle brand new for that type of service, you're looking at about $35,000. So we'll get a few more years out of this used bus, and it's just a good way to keep the equipment in the district and reuse it for other purposes.
Is this the first time you've started doing that? or-
No, we've been doing
Been
that.
doing it, okay.
Yes, we've been doing that.
Al, before you go to the next one, can you talk about the stop arm piece that we're looking to
Yes.
have on the buses?
Yes. So, a question was asked by Mr. Lau about the stop arm camera proposition that the governor has put in his proposal, right, to allow districts to install those cameras on the stop arms, right? My understanding is, based on what we're getting from the state association, is that that piece of his proposal is still in a state of flux because the governor wants the school districts to administer the program. So we issue tickets and we go collect money. That's not going to work.
Yeah, no.
So a lot of people are fighting against that. We love the idea of having the cameras, and with this, if you approve this replacement plan, those new buses will be coming equipped with 6 cameras, 5 inside and 1 on the outside. Right now, we have our state police and county sheriff. They're coming to us and asking us for pictures when they see cars pass our buses. They've been involved with us, especially on Route 9. We have a lot of passers, and so they've been very, very active in chasing those folks down. But the camera system that we have inside the bus really doesn't capture the details that they really need. Although we are sharing some of those pictures or videos with them. By installing the stop arm cameras on these new buses coming in, we can use them in those hot spots, and we can share some very detailed pictures of license plates, make, model, color of the car, and the picture of the driver. So it will help them go do their job as well. Irrespective if the governor's proposal gets adopted or whether the stop arm camera bill is adopted into law, which we came very close last year to get it passed. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, there was a second part to it, and that was if they did in fact pass the legislation, would we be able to add that as a spec on our new bus program?
Yeah.
Yes, we've
It
done
is.
that already on
Oh.
these new buses.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes,
Missed that.
it's part of the specs for the 20 buses.
And
In last year's purchase, we actually added the wiring to it, so we can go back and retrofit those buses we bought last year.
the last question, just to put a little perspective and context, I'm pretty sure you probably can answer this, but I believe we have the largest publicly owned transportation fleet between somewhere downstate, the Canadian border, the eastern boundary of New York, and somewhere out west, right?
Probably up the Syracuse area. Yeah, you're right. We in this region, we
Yeah.
are the biggest fleet
203?
publicly owned. 214. We're currently up to 214. Yeah.
Wow. Jumped.
That's why we need drivers.
Exactly. Any other questions?
Great job, Al.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it. So, again, the process will unfold. We'll hopefully, without any questions from the board will be asking the board at the April 9th meeting to adopt the final budget proposal. Then we'll have a study session April 16th to hear the BOCES budget, which we have incorporated some of those costs within our budget already. And then we have the budget hearing on May 7th. And then after that, in fact, this Friday, I'll have Mrs. Ford send out to the board again a copy of the roadshow schedule to when we start talking about the budget to various aspects of the community. So thank you.
Moving on to action items. Talk about staffing recommendations. Vote on it.
Thank you for allowing staffing recommendations this evening. We're still hiring throughout the year. So was there a question?
Oh, Mr. DeLello, you had a question about a staffing question. I said with Mrs. Bush.
Yeah, there was one individual math teacher that was going to be appointed to .2.
So-
It was, I think I remember that woman being granted maternity leave, or no, sorry, wrong. Getting tenure appointment as a full-time. Did she take maternity leave and now wants to come back part-time?
No, we had a math teacher who resigned in early March, and in the process of looking to fill with quality teacher at this time of year and not a substitute, we, in some cases, reach out to our own math teachers.
Right.
So the 5 math teachers that are here are each going to pick an additional
Pick up
section up.
Oh, okay,
And
gotcha.
we find that that's worked out very well for the transition for our students.
Okay.
And so the one particular teacher has been back for a couple of years now.
I remember her history, and I know she's quality, but she had 100% Regents passage, one of her first years teaching there. Yeah.
So that's the reason why they're on there tonight.
Good question. Any other questions? Okay, can I have a motion on this one? Mrs. Bajad? Second, Mrs. Stevenson, all in favor?
Thank you.
Okay, and that's done with the action items. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Mrs. Hoffman? Second. Ms. Stevenson, all in favor? Meeting over. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Sorry, it took a little longer, but. No, it's good.
Well deserved.
Whoa!
Well deserved.
All this dust in my office today.
Yeah, you're
I'm
cleaning.
overwhelmed with dust. So,
Thank you.
thank you. No, it's very good. I have some questions, but I'll do them later on.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like,
Sign it, sign it.
I think Glenn will have some questions for you.